Many demand sales teams don't fully understand the supply ecosystem and exactly how it's working. You can probably help identify some of the key differences between how these two sides can operate and why we maybe think there's even a disconnect still today.
Absolutely. It would be like the engine of a car. The drive shaft doesn't know what the carburetor does, okay? Yeah. Even though they're in the same hood. As a salesperson, my job is to go out, sell our inventory to advertisers and brands and make sure that I'm delivering exactly what they want. From the pub side, my job is to get inventory that is sexy enough for us, for the ad sales team to be able to sell, but also for us to be able to increase yield, make money, have scale, utilize our data. The challenge is when you go deeper under the hood. That's where both sides struggle a little bit. We used to have a saying back in the day, the ad sales team would sell dreams but create nightmares. And so the nightmare would be, you're selling all the, the sexy pubs, but we don't have, from a nightmare standpoint, we don't have no scale against those. And so now the pub team is trying to deliver something that they can't from the get-go. Is just not going to happen. There's a struggle right from the onset in terms of how both teams can become successful, not only in the organization, but also outside the organization with their clients.
Welcome to the PubWay podcast. Each episode will showcase a conversation with a leader from the publishing world. If you're working at a publisher, a DSP or SSP, or you're just curious about the media industry and want to sit down and pick the brains of the experts from within the publishing space, then this is the show for you.
Hello, and welcome to the PubWay podcast. My name is Tina Yanakito.
And I'm Mike Villalobos. And in today's episode, we have a goodie for you in season 2. We're actually going to be breaking down the differences and kind of challenges between supply teams and sales teams, demystifying programmatic advertising, some of the challenges that have come with kind of the classification of the show horse publishers versus the tier or like middle tier publishers, and also what that looks like in long tail. And then kind of a little bonus clip as well, walking through how traditional advertising in print media has affected and impacted some of the digital trends that we see today.
And it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Tony Franklin, CEO and founder at Tidbit Consulting. Most recently, he was also former VP of Sales and Client Partnerships at DirecTV. And he's also the founder of the wildly popular podcast, The Black Executive. Welcome, Tony. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great and really appreciate you guys and looking forward to this conversation.
Amazing. Before we dive right in, do you mind giving our audience just a little elevator pitch on your career and where you're coming from for a little context?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm an Army veteran, a husband, a father. As you said, I was a sales executive, sales leader, motivational speaker, sales coach, and award-winning podcast host. So I've been very blessed in my career. It's been a lot of, I wish I could tell you I planned this. I really didn't. There's been a lot of left and turns and ups and downs, but it's been a blessing and a great journey along the way. And obviously it brought me here today to you guys to meet, you and Mike, to have this great conversation. So it's always about learning and a part of the journey and meeting great people like yourself.
I love it. And I think a wildly popular thread through all of our conversations in this industry is everybody ended up here by accident.
That is actually true.
So true. So true. If they told you they planned it, they lied.
Exactly. There's too many acronyms coming out every day to be an
No question. No question.
But yeah, I'd love to get into our conversation and kind of start off on the balance between the demand side, the client, the agencies versus the supply, the inventory, the publishers. Many demand sales teams don't fully understand the supply ecosystem and exactly how it's working. Being a former sales associate, leader, and working closely with both sides of the ecosystem, you can probably help identify some of the key differences between how these two sides can operate and why we maybe think there's even a disconnect still today.
Absolutely. It's interesting because, I've been fortunate enough, or I don't know if that's fortunate enough to not only be on both sides, but also lead both sides. It's very difficult, and especially what's interesting is you have both sides in the same office most of the time, in the same organization. And then there's a major disconnect in terms of going to market. More importantly, both sides understanding they have a general sense overall what sales is supposed to do and what the pub dev team is supposed to do, but the interworkings and going deeper and having a better understanding so both departments can work together hand in hand and move forward, has been very challenging.
And do you feel that there's some of that challenge comes from the misunderstanding of both roles, of publishers not fully understanding the complexities of the sales role on the demand side, but also the vice versa of that, right? Is some of the sellers don't understand that publisher sales is still sales, just a different kind of same side or same coin, different side.
Yeah, I like to say we give money, we don't take money.
Yeah, I mean, again, absolutely. It would be like the engine of a car. The drive shaft doesn't know what the carburetor does, okay?
Yeah.
Even though they're in the same hood. So, yeah, the complexities, because at the end of the day, as a salesperson, your job, and you just try to keep things simple. My job is to go out, sell our inventory to advertisers and brands.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And make sure that I'm delivering exactly what they want. From the pub side, my job is to get inventory that is sexy enough for us, for the ad sales team to be able to sell, but also for us to be able to increase yield, make money, have scale, utilize our data. So those are at a high level. That's where everybody starts at with, and it totally makes sense. The challenge is when you go deeper under the hood.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you get under the hood, that's where both sides struggle a little bit, because the ad sales team is out talking to brands and agencies. And at the end of the day, they have a lot of competition that's also trying to get those same type of ad dollars.
Yep.
And what they want to do is sell their solution, but sell it at a high level in terms of that's going to meet the need of the agency and the brand. All right. So they're not really thinking about monetization. They're not thinking about yield. They want to just talk about the sexy things that they have that's going to attract the brand and the agency to work with them. All right. And so that's their job. That's what they're looking to do. They're not looking to go real deep. Well, on the other side, we used to have a saying back in the day: the ad sales team would sell dreams, but create nightmares.
We're using that.
That's good.
The nightmare would be, you're selling all the, the sexy pubs, but we don't, from a nightmare standpoint, we don't have no scale against those.
Sure.
All right. And we can't utilize our data because there's no scale. All right. And so now the pub team is trying to deliver something that they can't from the get-go. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
Okay. And so, but then when the pub team comes back and says, we can't run across these publishers, but these, as you talked about in your opening, these mid-tier publishers, they could be a fit. And well, no, because the brand or the agency doesn't want those publishers. So then there's a pull, a give and take, not a give and take, but there's a struggle, right, from the onset in terms of how both teams go to market. And more importantly, how both teams can become successful, not only in the organization, but also outside the organization with their clients.
I think you mentioned scale quite a bit, and I think that's exactly the issue we find across the entire ecosystem, which is why we have programmatic advertising, which helps us find that scale. And you mentioned also the data application, right? But then also with the loss of signal at times, whether it be third-party deprecation or even like mobile ad IDs or just any device ID, it's tough to find that application on top of the scale. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is more of how can sellers get used to or comfortable with selling into programmatic advertising, using programmatic as a tool or something to leverage when you're trying to find that scale versus, to your point earlier, of selling dreams and just saying, here's your elite pub list, elite being subjective at times, and just forcing kind of the wrong solution into the issue at hand. I would love to get your advice on that.
Yeah, you said a lot there, and there's a lot of ways I can go with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, number one, it depends on the organization. So, I've been in organizations that have a programmatic team, but they still don't have a lot of scale.
Sure.
Okay. So that doesn't help at all, right? It's still limited. I give you an example. We used to have meetings and the pub team would say, each week we have our weekly meeting. We have 500 million impressions available. We got this and that. And then the ad salesperson will go out and sell something and they come back and say, we can't deliver that. But wait a minute, you just got finished saying, we got 500 million or a billion. So at the end, and it's programmatic. So at the end of the day, it really comes down to understanding what those impressions are, When we say exactly what we have, how are we divvying? Is that national? Is that across all ad products? Is that from a regional standpoint? So there's a lot of different things that go along with that. But back to your question specifically in terms of programmatic, the challenge is I believe a lot of companies have moved over to a programmatic platform, all right, where they're selling their inventory or they're allowing DSPs and stuff to plug into their inventory and sell them from a programmatic standpoint. The challenge is that if you work for a pure play digital organization, you're going to, even if you came into the organization and you're not familiar with programmatic, you're going to learn it. And more importantly, you're going to learn it not just because of the training, because you're going to be actually doing it and selling it all the time. Yep. So you may be uncomfortable in the beginning, but after a while, you'll get used to it, blah, blah, blah. Well, if you're selling traditional media with a programmatic platform, okay, then it becomes a little bit difficult because yes, they are probably doing training. I've been in organizations where we would train our linear sellers how to sell programmatic. The challenge is an old saying, Mike Tyson came up with this, everybody has a game plan till they get punched in the mouth. All right. So when the seller goes out and now they're talking to a trading desk or they're talking to a programmatic buyer, they're now intimidated in terms because they don't know the jargon that you just got finished speaking about, Mike. Okay. And so now because they don't want to come across as stupid, they shy away from it. All right. And so at the end of the day, even though back at the gym, they're being trained on what to say, but unless you actually put it in practice day in, day out, it's not going to work. Number two, the other challenge, believe it or not, for companies, for AEs that are not familiar or won't sell programmatic, especially if they're selling something else, is how the company's comp plan is situated. Okay, so there's an old saying: AEs don't do what you say; they do what you pay. All right. So if the comp plan is set up for them to make more money off selling linear television versus digital, which one you think they're going to gravitate to?
I mean, that's an obvious
It's an obvious question, right? It's obvious, right? So you can train them all day long, but if the comp plan is not aligned in terms of how to be able to sell your inventory appropriately, then there's going to be a disconnect because they're not going to go out and do it. So it can be done from a pure play digital standpoint. It's being done every day. The challenge is when you have traditional sellers selling traditional media and now they have to sell programmatic, it becomes a challenge.
And I think with programmatic selling too, as we said, no one's an expert. We all got here by accident. And I think with the hesitation side of it, you mentioned doing a day in and day out is one way to acclimate and kind of level up. What other kind of advice or suggestions could you bring to younger, more green programmatic sellers to help them with that level up?
And you just said the word green level, right? And which that means they're young, they're just getting involved. I'm going to use a word that even experienced sellers have been around for 10, 15, 20 years, and they now have to sell programmatic, right? And so they're afraid. And it's something that we typically shy away from in everything that we do because it can't be this. And that's the word simple. Okay, you simplify it. All right. And there's an old saying, sell them what they're buying. Okay. So if I'm a new seller and I'm not familiar with programmatic, but I'm starting to learn it. Well, what does the agency, what does the brand care about? They care about data. They care about good inventory, and they care about it delivering. So if I keep my narrative simple to that, right? Forget the pipes and all the other thing I just need to know is that we're DSP agnostic. So no matter what DSP that you have, we can work with you, right? But if you focus on the inventory, all right, and you can focus on how your data can help them reach a specific audience, all right? And then, hey, no matter what DSP you work with, we can work with you. If you keep it simple like that, 9 times out of 10, you'll become successful. And then you'll start being able to gravitate to the other interworkings and the other terminology. But that's really the only thing you need to do. How do I know? I've trained salespeople who didn't have any programmatic experience. Okay, now they're over at Amazon or Google, all right, and they're VP of programmatic, or they're doing this and that because we kept it simple. And again, it was a terminology. Hey, we have this great inventory. This is what we got. We have this great data. It's first party data, subscriber base, blah, 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 blah. We can reach that audience you want. And by the way, no matter what DSP you work with, we're DSP agnostic. Let's put something together. We can send you a deal ID today. Done. Okay. And 9 times out of 10, that works out.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I mean, one of the interesting challenges I've noticed is the sellers that are willing to actually dive into the nuance or details of programmatic, just like maybe not trafficking, but understanding the inner workings, like a bid funnel or just looking at how things operate, are the best ones, are the best sellers. But the beauty of this entire ecosystem is programmatic has not been around very long, right? In terms of the grand scheme of things. So it put everybody on a level playing field. Similar to the way we're looking at, even, I hate to say AI, because we went all of, I guess, 14 minutes without saying AI. But
well, I mean, that's going to be a game changer by itself, right? Right.
But that again, I want to really reiterate on that fact of like, it's so nascent that it puts everybody in like an equal playing field. And it's up to you to figure out, how the engine actually works. If you figure out how the engine works, you'll figure out how to actually make the car faster, sensibly, right?
So I hear that though, Mike. And to your point, it makes, you're 100% right. The challenge is that when somebody's learning something from ground zero,
Sure,
they don't see it being an even playing field. Fair. Right? They see it as something I have to learn now. Mike learned this. Okay, maybe you just learned it 2 months ago. But when you start talking to them, you sound like you've been doing this for 30 years. Okay? And so that's one of the challenges, is that at the end of the day, we have to make people, even with brands, even with clients, there's brands, there's people that you chat with who don't know programmatic. Yep. Okay. They could be at GM, or they could be. So you have to simplify it even for your clients. Mm-hmm. If you're going to bring them on as partners and make it simple, because if you don't make it simple for them and you start using jargon that they don't understand, they're not going to work with you, because they're going to feel intimidated. So it goes all the way across the board.
Not wrong.
Yeah, I always say, please just explain this to me like I'm 5 years old.
Exactly. I mean, and see, so there you go, Tina. If you can keep it simple all the time, right? Regardless if you're a physicist or it is not, right? Keep it simple that everybody can understand it. That's how you build a big business.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like at the end of the day, we're not curing cancer here. We're selling ads on the internet.
It's impressions.
Amazing. You kind of touched on this before, but I'd love to kind of revisit it. The comparisons between the elite, the show horse publishers versus more of the mid-tier endemic publishers, and helping educate brands on why that inventory is still valuable. It's meeting all the KPIs. Obviously, you've probably been in the room for a lot of these conversations. And why do you think they're still being overlooked, I guess, the mid-tier and endemic publishers?
Well, I mean, the challenge always then, how should I say this? There was a challenge back in the day. You guys had just got finished talking about programmatic hasn't been around that long. It's not that old, which is true, right? But this challenge that I'm about to bring up has been around since digital started. Mm-hmm. And that's ads running against horrible, putting your ad next to some type of content or some type of, where somebody's doing a kickstand or something of that nature that can devalue the brand. Okay, so brands are afraid of that. All right. They're afraid, and rightfully so. So in their mind, the tier 1 publishers don't have to worry about that with ESPN or the New York Times or USA Today or what the case may be, because they know that wouldn't happen. But if you're going to run on TonyFranklin.org, or if you're going to run on Mike and Tina and Friends, right, they feel that, hey, there's a chance that my brand is going to show up against some content that is going to devalue my brand, right? So that's always been the fear, regardless. This has been back in the day when we were just doing mostly contextual targeting, to even now from a programmatic standpoint. The good news is that with programmatic, there's a lot of safeguards that you can do from an automation standpoint to make sure that ads don't run in those bad areas. But at the end of the day, clients still need to be educated not about publishers, about these mid-tier publishers, that they do fit their target audience, that the target audience is loyal to these mid-tier publishers, and they're just as effective. And more importantly, they can use their data, right? But there's still a disconnect when it comes to that as well, because I'm backing up a little bit, but I'm going back to the simplification again. I remember years ago, this was when I was working at Undertow. It was probably back in 08, 09. I never forgot this. And this is why I really talk about simplification. I forget maybe it was Dr. Scholl's. It was some slipper organization that we were working with directly. And they were in Ohio and net, whatever. So this was their first digital ad campaign. Okay. Never forget it. Right. And then all of a sudden they were going to be in town in New York City. And they said, hey, the CMO who I was really close with, hey, Tony, we're going to be in town. We'd be great if we can come by and you guys can give us an update, a report on how our digital ad campaign is working, blah, 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 blah. We said, okay, great. Right. So we got in the conference room, got everything, we were all prepared. Right. And I never forget it. So we had our digital account manager, young lady. She came in, they all sat around the table, the CMO, all his people, they're traditional advertisers. And then she starts going through and talking about, how the ad campaign was performing. And she's using all this technical jargon. And you can see their faces around the table. They're like,
what?
Exactly, right? What, right? And then and she said, any questions? And then obviously there wasn't. All right. And so she finished. And then we were all about to go to lunch or something of that nature. And he said, Tony, can you stay here for a quick second? I said, yeah. And I knew what was coming. All right. And he said, listen, man, he said, you saw my team's face as what's her name was going through. They didn't understand any of it. And he said, Tony, at the end of the day, he said, number one, you guys are better than this. He said, number two, he said, you guys have to simplify this in a way, because when I'm at work and I'm in the office and the CEO, I'm at the water cooler and the CEO says, how is your digital ad campaign working? Okay. If I can't explain it to him in simple terms, it's not going to work. We're not going to be able to work with you guys again. I never forgot that. So going back to your point about the education of the difference between show horses and plow horses, it's also educating the client that these publishers will work for them, will help them in reaching their audience, because that's where the major education needs to happen. You can tell an agency, the sales team can go out, they can go out with the pub team and scream and holler and tell the agency that these publishers are going to be a perfect fit. But at the end of the day, they got to go back and sell their client on that. Okay. And it's not an easy sell if the client is not educated on mid-tier publishers, the effectiveness of them, the scale, the data, and then all of the safeguards that's in place to ensure that their brand won't show up against fake content.
One thing I really noticed is, and maybe you disagree or agree, but interest is driven, I think, at the show horse publishers, right? Like there's for example, headlines or whatever topic of the day, there's the interest there. But many times culture and really a deep understanding or caring of the topic drives from a mid-tier publisher, because you're going there for a reason, right? If it's a mid-tier publisher or even something more nuanced because it's focused on, your background or whatever your hobby is, that is a true culture mover. So I think just because you have mid-tier / less traffic sites doesn't mean the quality is any less. It's just more focused on the person who's reading it.
Yeah. And the freemium pubs are taking notice of what the smaller pubs are reporting on, and then they're jumping on the bandwagon.
Exactly.
There's no question. And then the other thing, though, some of the mid-tier pubs can have more traffic than the show horses, right? And so that's the other thing that gets lost in the sauce here. I remember when I worked at a company called Just Premium, and so we used to do this all the time. Our claim to fame was high impact ads from a programmatic standpoint, right? So the big flashy ads that would take over the screen. And we did this all from a programmatic standpoint. We could not run. And so everybody wanted to be on the New York Times, ESPN, all those show horses, right? But at the end of the day, you can't operate that way because there's not enough scale. But sites like Chegg, which was an educational site, really good site, right? ton of inventory. You can use data in the whole 9 yards. We needed sites like that to mix in with the show, the premium pubs, to be able to deliver ad campaigns, right? And so it became, back to the point, it became a tough sell because first question people ask you, send me your pub lists. And when you send them to them, if they didn't see those premium pubs, they didn't want to work with you, right? So our strategy became more about going directly to the client and starting to educate them on the publishers that we had, those mid-tier show horses, and how we would mix them together, and then the safeguards, the data. And because we did that, we were able to start being able to work with them and really sell our ad campaigns and deliver in a big way.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And you definitely see better performance on those mid-tier.
There's no question.
Because people are so engaged and they don't mind maybe the more aggressive ad experience because they're so obsessed with the content. One of I used to work at She Media. I remember one publisher I signed there, Bloody Disgusting, great domain name. They're niche in horror films and like the cults of horror films. And they exactly, but they loved Skins, the Just Premium, like a la.
Yeah, so you remember our Just Premium, the Skins and stuff, right?
Of course, been around a bit, even though my book goes differently. But those were the best performing sites for those campaigns.
There's no question.
We're engaged and constantly refreshing, watching trailers, talking on forums. Yeah, it's funny.
All right, so let's take this a step back really quickly. I feel like we've hit 2008 with Undertone a little bit. We're gonna go a little further in the DeLorean, and talk about print advertising. I mean, you've been in the game for a minute now, and I think a part of like 40 newspapers of the course of your career you've represented, which is impressive. I want to hear more on the lines of what's different between print advertising selling outside of the obvious automation and technology, but also what's similar, right? Like, what are things that like nothing's really changed in that regard? And I want to hear the lessons and the trials, tribulations, all of the good, bad, and ugly.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Matter of fact, I'll tell you guys this quick story. And, I live in Connecticut. I've been commuting, working in the city since 2000. And I remember going to the gym early in the morning, hopping on the train here in Milford, Connecticut, to take the train, Metro North, into New York City. And at each platform, there would be a newspaper dispensary. Mm-hmm. And I would have to get there early and put my 50 cents in to get my newspaper. And so I can get on the train and read the newspaper as I'm commuting in the city. And I never forget that. I can still see it, right? You'll be on the train, it's quiet, you can hear a pin drop, but the one thing you would see is papers all along, right? People reading the Wall Street Journal or whatever on the train. Now you get on the train and you just see this, okay? People looking at their phone, right? So the newspaper industry was, believe it or not, back in its heyday, it was a $50 billion medium. Mm-hmm. All right. It was second to television. Okay. And so there's a lot of parallels and there's a lot of differences. In the print world, it was simple, right? Once you understood what a CPI is, and you had a full page, quarter page, half page, and you couldn't put an ad on the front page, and page 3 was a premium position, and print advertising was more about branding. Okay. It was pretty much all branding. It really wasn't about direct response, anything to that nature. And then, obviously I worked at a company that we represented 40 newspapers across the country for national advertising. So, you had brands like Merrill Lynch and Chase and Samsung that would want to be in they want their ad to run in multiple publications on the same day. Okay. So maybe they wanted to be in the top 20 markets. So, but then you go to digital, and then I went to Undertone, an ad network, which was similar, right? We had 300 ads, 300 sites, and people could run their ads, across multiple sites. So it was similar in that case, but it was different in terms of the execution. It was different in terms of the evolution. Print advertising, the only thing that's changed over the last 30 years is they added digital. Mm-hmm. Okay. But the same mechanism is the same. The other thing that has changed is that the subscribership has gone down drastically, and this is circulation. And that's how they used to make their pricing, is based on, the San Jose Mercury News will say I had 300,000 circulation on a daily basis, what case may be, and that's how they would set their rates. Where in digital is totally different now, right? So, but the excuse me, but the similarities were similar. Excuse me, the similarities were that brands wanted to be in multiple places at the same time. All right. They wanted to reach multiple audiences across the country at the same time. Right. I think the other thing that's really key here too is that when digital first started out back in the early 2000s, it was more of a direct response mechanism.
Right.
Okay. And then you had to convince brands that you could use digital from a branding standpoint, where newspaper was pretty much all branding, right? And so now digital now is a branding mechanism, as well as it can be a direct response mechanism and stuff to that nature. What I loved about the digital industry, and what is very beautiful about it, and for people like yourself, who seem like you like change and you always want to be at the edge of your seat in terms of what's new, what's coming.
A little chaos don't hurt nobody.
That's the beauty, right? I started off, we were doing contextual targeting. I remember when retargeting first came out, it was like, oh my God, this ad is following me. All right. And stuff to that nature, right? And now, you get the DSPs and first party data. And, now we go into AI, and people were talking about the metaverse, and, it's just continually to evolve, right? Where the print medium has definitely taken a back seat, and rightfully so, right? This is how progress happens. But I would not, to be fair, I would not have made the jump. I wouldn't have been successful, I should say, in my first stop had I not been on the print side, because it gave me a good foundation to be able to move forward.
Do you think those print / publications that are more magazine focused maybe make a resurgence in terms of a digital capacity? Because I feel like everything's cyclical, right? And there is something endearing about a magazine and the way it's written, whether it be an op-ed piece or even educational. Do you think they actually have that, jump ahead in the next 3 to 5 years because of whatever medium they decide to choose?
Yeah, I mean, you've seen some of that though, right? You've seen organizations' digital footprint increase substantially. All right. And, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. I mean, think about it. I read the Wall Street Journal every day. I don't read it in the magazine. I read it off my phone. Right. Yeah. So I see, and you're going to continue to see that evolved. The one thing though is this: it's interesting when you look at an industry, something I learned a long time ago. Either you accept change or you get changed. Okay. And I'll say that one more time. Either you accept change or you get changed. And I'll tell you a quick little story about that. When I was on the print side, okay, like I said, it was a $50 billion business. Okay. Everybody wanted to be in the newspaper. I'm serious. Everyone. All right. And to the point where the newspapers were very arrogant. Right. They would push back and be like, well, you don't give us this rate, you're not getting in. And there was no alternatives. There was no other place outside of television. There was no other place for them to go. Okay. And then all of a sudden, this little thing called digital came around. All right. And the print industry looked at it as being a fad. Okay. So they were very slow to open their arms. Right. Because number one, the margins. Okay. They're making big money off, a full page ad in the New York Times for one day would be $300,000. That's just one day for one ad. Okay. And then now you got you paying $5 CPM for digital. It doesn't make sense from a monetization standpoint. But back to either you accept change or you get changed. So they didn't accept change. They were slow to evolve. Okay. And guess what? They got changed. Okay. So that $50 billion business now is $14 billion. And this little fad, now is worth, I can't even put a amount of money on it, right? So that's one of the things, one of the lessons I'll never forget is that when change comes, it's difficult. You got to get out of your comfort zone. But at the end of the day, you have to really roll with it and be willing to learn from it, right? Because nothing stays the same. Either you're moving forward or you're moving backwards.
I agree with that. And back to your comment about the quote of Mike Tyson about, everyone has a plan until you punch in the mouth. What's interesting is when social came about, everyone thought it was going to be a fad as well. And I think what would have been what would have been a powerful move is if publications would have actually partnered together to create their own quote unquote walled garden or just a general garden to expand reach. But they were so stuck in their way of, no, I'm against you and you're against me because of the print days. And we're very pedantically looking at like how to, move into the future. They left themselves in the dust, in my opinion, because of the fact that they didn't want to let the egos go, combine forces, and actually create and water their own garden, ostensibly, versus the, Metas or Twitters of the world, or whatever social media platform that you're looking at. So I think there's lessons to be even had there. But to your point,
there's no question, buddy. No question. You hit it around the head.
And I think as we're speaking about kind of where we've come from, looking ahead, especially as someone who you've worked across CTV, traditional media, digital media, what other trends you see shaping the next 5 or so years of media? Not a difficult question at all.
Are you on record?
And I will hold you to it.
I think I got I was playing Wheel of Fortune last night, so maybe I can come up with a good answer for you. I mean, you kind of spoke a little bit to it earlier, the rise of AI.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing a lot of companies now double down on putting AI as part of their infrastructure, right? You're going to see media plans that are going to be developed by AI. You're going to, I mean, and it's really, you're going to, you're talking about data and stuff to that nature. You have organizations using AI to say, hey, listen, we can hit this audience here. We can do this and that. A lot of people are afraid of it because, the fear is it's going to cost jobs, and it may in some instances, but it's going to help once the bugs, nothing is foolproof, but once it evolves, it's going to be more efficient. It's going to help a lot of organizations on both sides be able to make money, but more importantly, provide their clients with exactly what they're looking for, right? So I think the retail media networks, you're going to see that continue to grow. I mean, with right now you got Walmart and Amazon and Target, and they're not going anywhere. Okay. And going back to that walled garden you talked about, Mike, we're usually talking about Facebook and stuff of that nature. Well, these guys have set their own walled gardens. All right. Because they have access to the data, shopper data and stuff to that nature. So, they have insights. You look at Amazon, which I think we all use, just think about all the data that they have on every household. Okay. And now from an advertising standpoint, who's more positioned to be able to target those individuals, reach those individuals, and not only that, know exactly what their interests are. So you're going to see you're going to see that continue to double down and grow. And, whatever happened to the metaverse, I mean, that was supposed to have been something, this was going to New Year's and Dunkin' Donuts was going to, and so maybe that comes back. But I think AI is going to be huge, right? And I think that, going back to either you accept change or you get change, I think people have to be willing to accept that's where the direction is going and start getting on board as soon as possible because, we all have hindsight is 2020. You just got finished saying, hey, had the publishers did this and created their own walled garden instead of their ego, then they'll probably be. And I don't think nobody wants to get caught up in that. I think people really want to start jumping on the train because the train is moving fast and you don't want to get left behind.
Absolutely. And I think too, it might be crazy, but with the chokehold that ChatGPT has on search traffic right now, maybe print comes back in some way.
You know what?
It repeats itself.
So true. One of the things though, and Tina, that's an excellent point. One of the things that you've seen because of, supposedly cookies going away, right? Every time they go away, they come back. Yeah. right. But you've seen a rise in contextual targeting, okay, where brands are now just want to be aligned in content that fits their brand, right? And so, but that's how digital targeting started in the first place.
Yeah.
So you're definitely right. You'll definitely see some things come back because things are cyclical. But I definitely believe that AI is definitely on the rise, and it's something that it's just going to be a part of our lives, almost in every facet.
Love it. Look, I think we could talk to you all day long.
Yeah.
But before we hopped on for our listeners, I was mentioning that your voice is just very calming and soothing. So I just want to talk to you more. But we do have to wind down here, unfortunately. But before we do, and especially coming from your aspect, I'm excited for this question. What's the best and worst advice you've ever gotten? Because I feel like you've gotten a lot of good and bad, maybe. So
Enlighten us.
Oh, buddy, oh my God. You say you're going to wind down the conversation? 'Cause, I could talk another 3 days for that. So let me go with the best advice I've
Okay.
gotten. The best advice I've gotten is to be me.
Mm,
Okay. There's times in my career, where I, tried to be somebody else.
sure.
Okay. And I really did, because I thought that was the pathway to moving up, and it wasn't working. And I remember somebody pulling me aside. I can still see it right now and say, Tony, you just got to be you. But be the best version of you. And once that person said that, in that moment, a light bulb clicked, and it just never looked back ever since then. And I just rose, and I was just being me, right? So that was the best advice. The worst advice, I would say the worst advice, I had an opportunity to go to Boston and work, selling local television advertising in Boston. And people were telling me not to go. Okay. They were saying, don't go to Boston. You ain't going to like it, blah, blah, blah. And I went anyway. And it was the best experience I ever had. I met my wife. I have 2 beautiful daughters. I have best friends from there. So that was the worst advice that I didn't listen to.
The chatter.
Yeah.
The chatter from the peanut gallery. It's easier to ignore sometimes.
Oh yeah.
I love that. I love ending on be authentic. I think is a very good take.
Yes.
Conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Be who you are, right? You only got one you, but be the best version of you. That's the thing though, too, right? Be the best version of you.
Love it. Well, Tony, thank you so much. Like Mike already said, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm sure we'll be tapping you for a follow-up at some point if you'll answer our phone call. But yeah,
No.
I really love this.
Well, no, thank you. You guys are fantastic. And, I'm glad what you guys are doing here. This is great. The industry needs this. You guys make a great, I was going to use the word couple, but I was like,
We're work
that's
husband and
host.
wife.
Yeah. I know. And I get it. But you guys are fantastic. And anything that I can do to help assist you in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out. I got you guys' back. I really appreciate it. And I wish you guys nothing but mad success moving forward.
Tony, the feeling's mutual. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise, my friend. Well, thank you so much.
Take care, guys.